In the April 2025 update to World of Warships Legends, the legendary tier Italian cruiser Napoli got a buff that I've been waiting for it to get for quite a long time now. For a long time, the Napoli's base secondary range was a mere 5 kilometers. That's changed now. The base secondary range is 6 kilometers after the buff. And previously, I didn't really think it was worth building into the secondaries for Napoli, just because you could only extend the range to maybe a maximum range of about 8.5 kilometers with the 5 km base range. But now that the secondary range has been buffed, I am able to achieve a range of 9.5 kilometers on these secondaries for Napoli. And the question I had was, is it worth building into the secondaries? After all, we have things like the Michelangelo at Tier 8, another Italian cruiser, albeit with an unusual design. The secondaries on that ship are sort of in the place of the main guns, and then the main guns are down the center. Napoli, of course, has a much more conventional main gun design with two turrets at the front, one at the back. And so, was it worth it to build into the Napoli secondaries? Well, what I did over the past few days was play about 10 to 15 games with the Napoli secondary build. And so I've got a few results to show you, starting with this one right here. These secondaries, if they're anything, are sort of like a damage amplifier. You can see we've got a scenario where a ton of the enemy team is on this side of the Two Brothers map, and we've got Salem out here who is going to spot us and prevent us from pushing further. Salem, of course, is an American heavy cruiser at Tier 8. It's basically the same thing as the Des Moines, so it's got excellent DPM with its main battery guns, which reload much quicker than ours. It would be able to theoretically out DPM us with its HE. But as you can see, with our HE and with our secondaries in tandem, we can kind of keep up with the Salem. We're making a little bit of a mistake here, reversing past the island and opening our broadside to whatever battleship that was, but we get lucky. And Napoli, of course, is a very, very well armored cruiser. There are people that I've seen in the past say for some reason it isn't. I think they're only looking at the top of the bow armor, which is, to be fair, 25 millimeters and can be overmatched by everything. But at the same time, it's got a 60 millimeter icebreaker on the bow. That will prevent you from getting citadeled through the front, and really that's the most important thing. And then on the side armor, it's got an upper belt plating of 40 millimeters, and the deck armor is also 40 millimeters. Plus, it's got a 220 millimeter armor belt. And the superstructure is fairly minimalistic. So even with this Salem shooting at us, if his HE shells hit that 40 millimeter deck or belt plating, they're just going to shatter. Exactly like that salvo there. You see it lit a fire, but it didn't actually do any damage with HE pens. And of course, that plating is going to be able to bounce even the largest caliber battleship shells when it's properly angled. So it's a very tanky cruiser that you really could use to push in and brawl. And of course, the secondaries are going to help you do that. They'll also help you in situations like this where you're posted up next to an island, trying to 1v1 essentially a Salem and whittling his HP down over time. He's also got a super heal, which means, of course, he can restore a lot more HP than typical cruisers can. But at this point, we've done about 60,000 damage just to him, and the numbers are still counting with the perma fire that we have burning. Another hit from the secondaries. You can see that when these secondaries do make contact, they can do a lot of damage. There's two sets of secondaries, by the way. There's one set of 90 millimeter secondary guns. That's 12 in total. 6 double turrets of 90 millimeter secondaries. They reload in 3.2 seconds, and the sap does a maximum of 2,000 damage. Then we've got 4 triple turrets of 152 millimeter guns for a total of 12. These reload much longer, 7.2 seconds. And then the sap is 3,850. And of course, Napoli being an Italian cruiser, it's got the smoke. So after we sort of finish off the Salem, and have him hiding behind an island, We can use the smoke screen to push up to a large battleship like Yamato. We've got torpedoes too, so we can launch those. And all the while we're concealed in the smoke screen, the secondaries will do damage. You see there, that's about 7K with a couple hits on Yamato's bow. And the damage continues to rack up. Now, of course, we're going to make a mistake here in this little engagement. I don't think we launched our torpedoes in the water. We were a bit worried that they were going to hit our battleship teammate. And I did say that the Napoli side armor can bounce even the highest caliber battleship shells, but only when you angle it properly. You see there, the Yamato just goes right through the cheek, I think, and takes us out, but we get him in return with the torpedoes. Moving on to the next clip, we'll see that you can approach a Yamato correctly and not have that happen. Of course, this one's much lower HP, but here's an example of once again pushing into a battleship, letting the secondaries do the talking, and staying concealed inside the smoke screen on the approach. This time, I think we will get the torpedoes in the water, and then we'll tighten up the angle as we exit the smoke screen, launching the torpedoes. Now, if the secondaries or main guns don't take out Yamato, then these torpedoes will do the job. But notice also a Shimakaze out there who is now spotted. These secondaries are absolutely lethal to destroyers. Now, they're not going to hit every salvo they launch, but when they do hit, they do a tremendous amount of damage. 630 there against the Shimakaze. Not too impressive, but over 1,200 there for the last little shot to finish him off. And we get the close quarters expert. This was a bit of an unfortunate battle. I would have liked to show you the whole thing, because I think it's fairly representative of a scenario where the secondaries are working all right on the ship. And we were 1 kill away from getting a Xarkun, too, against this Zhao, but he's angled. And maybe I should have been shooting HE at him instead, because all we're getting are bounces with the armor piercing. But as you can see, he's the only ship left alive on the red team. We're at 961 points. In a moment here, one of our teammates is inexplicably going to desperately ping us to get back, as if I don't know the Zhao has torpedoes and that this is a dangerous thing. But of course, I was going for the Xarkun. And, well, 988 points, all 3 capped. Somebody telling us to get back. No, we're not going to do that. But we win the game before we can secure the Xarkun there. Unfortunate. Anyway, moving on to a fuller, more representative match. We'll cut out the boring parts in this one, but I don't think there are always going to be situations where you're going to make huge, great use of the secondaries. And in order to achieve this build, what I've done is used Paolo di Revel, the same guy I use on the Michelangelo. He is, of course, a battleship commander, and we've got Hipper and Haruna as his 2 inspirations, plus the porcupine skill in the second row. That's how we achieve the maximum range of 9.5 kilometers on these secondaries. That and the secondary module in the first slot. Of course, if we're going to be doing that, we're giving up the benefits that other cruiser commanders might allow us to have, including things like the fully packed skill. Without that, we only have 2 charges of our smoke screen. Any of the other cruiser commanders can give you fully packed, and then you can get 3 charges as well as 3 heals. I suppose the upside to that is that Revel has Master Mechanic, and so we can get 2 extra heals for a total of 4 instead of just 1, which allows our longevity to be a little bit better and just gives us more overall tankiness. And it's that tankiness, and then also the firepower of the main battery guns on Napoli that are, I think, it's bread and butter. These are 9 254mm guns with a range of 16.8 kilometers on this build, and a reload time of 17 seconds, as well as a turret traverse time of 25.7 seconds. That's another matter that I found while building for the secondaries. Originally, I had the main battery reload mod installed, but with that, and the nerf that it gives to the turret traverse, the, I think, 12% nerf, I found the turret traverse to be a little bit too slow for brawling situations. So it was either switch to the secondary mod, which I did for a while, and that does help with the reload time on these secondaries, or it was switched to the range mod, which I ultimately ended up doing because the base range just felt a bit too short to me, especially early on in the game where maybe you want to be firing at longer range before the herd thins out and you can push in a little bit more to brawl. Speaking of which, we've got Stalingrad pushing into us, and as you can see, he's not having a fun time with these secondaries. They're able to pen even his very thick armor, and we're able to protect ourselves fairly well against this Stalingrad, doing 44,000 damage to him. Well, actually, I think we hit the Zhao for a citadel before we started fighting the Stalingrad, but he's about to go down in this Charlie cap. He's really the only ship around this part of the map. The Zhao did initially come with him, but the Zhao has turned around to kite back to the map border. So once this Stalingrad is toast, we're simply going to turn around and then we're going to head closer to the action to finish out the rest of this battle. You can see we're in a scenario where it almost looks like we can push in to a lot of different enemy ships. Schroeder, Montana, we've got a Des Moines over there around the corner of the island. He's the main problem that I want to get off the board in order to achieve this push. What you can do, as you saw a little bit earlier in the video, is use these smoke screens to conceal your approach on the way in toward ships, and then have your secondaries fire while you're concealed in the smoke screen. Can't really do that if you've got to worry about a radar cruiser who can reveal you inside of the smoke screen. So our hope is to take out the Des Moines. Once again, we're having some, I suppose, issues with the Zhao. The AP is just not cutting it against his non-broadside. He's got, I believe, 30 millimeter plating, so it's no surprise that he can bounce our armor-piercing shells. These are big guns for a cruiser, but they aren't 431 millimeter guns, so they're not going to be overmatching the 30 millimeter plating of Zhao. And yet, somehow we get a citadel there. Not exactly sure how that happened when he's got his stern pointed at us, but, you know, I'll take it. In any case, Des Moines looks like he's going to be eliminated soon. He takes a big hit there from one of our teammates. He's got us caught and revealed in the sonar, but it looks like the battleship in front of us isn't really paying attention to us. I think he's got some of our battleship or cruiser teammates to fight on the other side of the map. Another shot there at the Zhao. Once again, though, I don't think the results are very good. 3 ricochets. How lovely. Des Moines goes down, there is no longer any threat of radar, and so we can deploy a smoke screen here and get turned around. I don't think we want to push immediately into the Montana, the other battleship, and the Zhao. If we get too far up here, then we're going to be the primary target that all 3 of them are focusing, and that probably is going to mean we sink before we get any real brawling accomplished. Montana, of the one-track mind, is pushing into our battleship teammates. He does not have his guns pointed in this direction. Smoke screen runs out, and so we're able to shoot at his broadside with the main battery guns, but we are not really paying as much attention as we should be to our positioning, and so we hit the island. Thankfully, there will be no consequences for that because Montana, well, he's not very interested in us. He's interested in the rest of our team. Vampire 2 spotted. The secondaries begin to open up. And, well, the reason I wanted to show you this battle is because this is perhaps one of the better XP results I got in my session of testing out the Napoli secondary buff. But also, it's a battle where, well, there's not a lot of secondary hits. We've only got 90 so far. 3 citadels from our main battery guns, 60 main battery shell hits, 1 torpedo hit. This thing has more armaments than just the secondaries. It's almost like on Michelangelo, the secondaries are the primary armament, and you can extend their range further than the Napolis. And so that is more of a dedicated secondary cruiser than this is. If anything, the secondaries on the Napoli are an interesting third option to amplify the damage that you're able to achieve while you take this cruiser into brawling scenarios. So I would say for that reason, in tandem with the excellent armor scheme, the great firepower of the main battery guns, the smoke screen, Napoli can be a really good brawling cruiser, and the secondaries really help facilitate that if you want to build into them. The only real problem is the problem that the Michelangelo also shares, which is that in order to achieve this secondary build, you've got to use a battleship commander, namely Paolo di Revel. What I would like to see Wargaming do in the future, given we have some secondary focused cruisers in the game now, namely this one, the Napoli, the Michelangelo, and the German cruiser Schroeder, I'd like to see them put in some historical, free to obtain commanders like Paolo di Revel, only have them be cruiser commanders, both for the Italian and German lines, give them at least the porcupine skill, and then anything else that might help facilitate secondary builds. I think that would be better and more efficient than being forced to use people like Revel on the Napoli and Michelangelo, or one of the German battleship commanders for the Schroeder. That's what I would like to see in the future. But in any case, I think with the buff, Napoli's secondaries are worth building into now. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.